what is the Bible position on polygamy? A few days ago, a friend of mine came to me and said he believes that the Bible approves polygamy. And personally, I was shocked. And then I said, no, I believe the Bible is against polygamy. So, first thing I need to say is this friend is Muslim and I am Christian. So, his point was to say we don't need to argue that Islam or the Quran approves polygamy. But he was trying to say that even according to the Bible standard, polygamy is okay. And I was trying to say no. So that puts me in a position to actually research the topic, and I came to some conclusion that I want to share today. Welcome on my channel. My name is Mergel. I come from Cameroon and I live in Seoul, South Korea. So in Cameroon, actually, polygamy is legal, and there are about 58 countries around the world where polygamy is legal. What is polygamy? It's simply the fact for one man or one woman to have multiple spouses at the same time. So some countries make it illegal, and some other, as I mentioned, 58 are making it legal to have several spouses. Well, the most common practice is for one male to have multiple female partners or spouses, which is called polygyny. But for the sake of discussion, we're just going to say polygamy today. Why would people think that polygamy is approved by the Bible? Well, it's pretty simple. You have about 40 occurrences of polygamous marriages in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament. They're just there all across the Old Testament. And from after Adam and their grandchildren, they started to have Lamech, for example, had 2 wives. And then you have Jacob, you have Abraham, who had 1 wife and 1 concubine, and so on and so forth. The most famous one is Solomon, the 3rd king of Israel, who had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Man, I don't know how he was able to do that. Anyway, the point here is that the Bible also provides in the Old Testament, in the Mosaic Law, a legal framework for polygamous marriages to happen. It actually gives some prescriptions in Exodus 21 and Deuteronomy 21 for men to legally take women as wives, especially the female or war prisoners. Yes, female war prisoners can be taken as 2nd, 3rd wives by those men. So one can say that the several occurrences of polygamous marriages in the Old Testament or in the Bible in general stand as a proof that the Bible is okay or approves for polygamous marriages. Especially because when we move to the New Testament, there is no clear rejection or condemnation of the New Testament. And usually, as Christian, our standard is to read the Old Testament and read the teachings of Jesus Christ. And every time Jesus could come and modify or change teaching of the Old Testament to bring a new teaching, a new principle, then we take that principle as the standard. For example, the Old Testament teaches to hate your enemies, but Jesus in Matthew 5 said, you should love your enemies. So you see that the previous standard has been changed into a new standard. So you have a lot of examples like that, but several times Jesus will simply confirm or reaffirm the principle of the Old Testament, which is what will be the base for my position to say that the Bible is actually against polygamous marriages. So I've just presented my methodology, and full disclaimer, Jesus actually never specifically addresses the issue of polygamy. He never points out to that specific question of polygamy. We have Paul in his letters, especially 1 Corinthians, 1 Timothy, and Titus, where he is talking about polygamy, and he instructs men, especially men leaders of the church, to have one wife. But you don't see Jesus actually talking about the topic. So how do we draw God's position from the teachings of Jesus? Well, it's pretty simple. There is one occurrence in Matthew 19 that I want us to see together. And in Matthew 19, we see the Pharisees coming to Jesus. The Bible actually says that they came and they wanted to try Jesus with that question. And the question was pretty simple. They said, should a man be allowed to divorce his wife for just any reason? And as a response, Jesus will send them back to the scriptures and say, well, the Bible, from the beginning, God made them male and female. This explains why a man leaves his father and his mother and is joined to his wife, and the two will be united into one. And verse 6 goes like this: since they are no longer two but one, let no one split apart what God has joined together. This is what the Bible says. So in the context, the Pharisees came and addresses the question of divorce, not polygamy. And Jesus sent them back to Genesis 2, where God created men and women, male and female, and put them together, and through the institution of marriage they become one. And Jesus is saying, let no one separate or split what has become one. And this is where I believe that we can draw a very simple conclusion on this topic of polygamy, because the assumption is that one man can become one with several women at the same time. But Jesus says, no, it's impossible. That's why divorce, except in the case of death or sexual immorality, cannot be approved. A man who divorces his wife out of those two conditions or those two reasons is committing adultery, which means when your partner is still alive and has not committed adultery, you cannot be separated, which means you are still bound and you two are one. Therefore, it is impossible for one man to be one with one woman and then have sex with another woman without breaking the first covenant, which means it makes the polygamous argument impossible in God's perspective, which is why I believe personally that based on Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, God's intention at the beginning when he created the original intention of God was for one man to be married to one woman. Then why do we have so many occurrences of polygamous marriages in the Bible? Well, because God permitted it to happen. But it doesn't mean that God was agreeing with that practice. In the case of divorce, for example, we see clearly when the Pharisees asked Jesus about the provision that is given in the Mosaic law to write a letter to divorce, and they say that Moses actually gave them a provision to divorce their wives by just giving her a letter. Jesus' answer is simple. Verse 8, Jesus replied, Moses permitted divorce only as a concession to your hard heart, but it was not what God had originally intended. And this is my conclusion here. Yes, we have a lot of occurrences of polygamous marriages in the Old Testament. Yes, we see some provisions in the Mosaic law for polygamous marriages as well. But does that mean that the Bible is okay, or that the Bible approves? Or let me rephrase it this way. Does that mean that God's intention is for one man to have multiple wives? My answer is no. because God's original intent was for one man to be with one woman and the two become one. It's an exclusive relationship where only death or sexual immorality can bring division and separation. Therefore, a man being engaged in a polygamous marriage is actually committing adultery. That is my understanding and that's my position. If you disagree with me, please feel free to comment. If you like the content, please like, share, subscribe, and any topic you want me to talk about, please feel free to ask and I'll be more than happy to share with you. See you in the next video.